check with Griffin and David. Blank check with Griffin and David. Don't know what to say or to expect. All you need to know is that the name of the show is Blank Check.
An evil is coming that threatens our kingdom, our freedom. But we have a podcast they are not prepared for.
Okay, good job.
Right? I
Great.
don't know.
I don't know.
Look, sometimes we cover a movie that does not have an IMDb quotes page.
Is that this one? This
Well-
has got a few. This
well-
has got some trailer.
Look, it's certainly not a thing we're going to harp on to any degree in this episode, but this movie's already been the victim of bad faith online trolls, right? And this film has enough quotable, cool, badass lines in the trailer.
Right.
And the movie's already a hit. It is the type of film that usually gets a fully submitted, filled out quote page pretty quickly on IMDb, what is usually a largely a user-generated site.
Yeah.
I have to feel like this is some kind of troll. The one quote on the Woman King IMDb quotes page is Niska,
Yeah.
Viola Davis characters. It says in brackets, as a company of warriors break out into a song and dance. And then the quote is, if you like pina coladas and getting caught in the rain, if you're not into yoga.
That's not that right. Unless, I mean, is that like a, post-credits scene I didn't catch maybe?
I stayed through the credits.
Okay.
I stayed through the credits. There's a post-credit scene with a mid-credit cookie with Sheila Atim.
I may not have seen that.
Yeah. It's just kind of a nice moment. I mean,
What is it?
It's one of those things. It's her like at the grave sites
Sure.
of the fallen warriors, sort of like saying a prayer for them. It's one of those things where we're now so conditioned that when something like that happens,
like, what does it mean? But it's
Lashauna's
actually
Lynch to come out of the grave, her hand to fucking rise.
Woman King 2, baby,
Right.
out for revenge.
Right.
Zombie King.
Right. It's a thing that fucking Old Guard is obsessed with as well. It's a thing that
Oh yeah,
clearly,
Old Guard had one, right?
But no, I'm just saying the Gina thing of like she's very interested in not letting the collateral damage of action sequences just become
be forgotten
fodder.
and just be like,
They're
that's
people,
fair.
they
But
died.
I just didn't know there was a little scene there.
Yeah.
I can explain why in a minute.
They don't
but yeah.
sing the Escape the Pina Colada song though.
No, they don't sing that. I mean, that's too bad.
Do you know that and we were just talking about this right before we started recording. Literally everyone on the internet is exhausting. And I'm going to say pretty close to the top of that list myself.
Yeah.
We all should stop it.
Introduce our podcast.
This podcast is called Blank Check with Griffin and Dave.
Wow.
This podcast is called Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
It is a podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. And sometimes those checks clear, sometimes they bounce, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Now, today is a one-off episode,
Mm-hmm.
returning to a filmmaker we've covered in the past.
Our final in a series of new films we've been covering.
We got 3 new movies in a row: a Miller,
by George Miller, Robert
Zemeckis,
Zemeckis, yes,
and a Prince-Bythewood.
Gina Prince-Bythewood.
When we did Gina on this show, summer of 2020,
Summer of 2020, correct.
not a great time to be a person.
Tough time. We did it. Was it in between Miller and Zemeckis, in fact? It's funny that they're all
believe-
together again. Or
Yeah.
was there Efron in there too? It's hard to remember anything anymore.
I think it was Miller, Efron, Bythewood, Zemeckis.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Right?
I'm just checking. Yes, correct.
If only they discovered a long lost Nora Ephron film to fill out this month.
Yeah.
But yes.
That'd be fun.
We were at a place fucking 5 years into doing the podcast where we were like sort of taking stock of what the show has become.
Mm-hmm.
And, to a certain degree, she is a filmmaker that both you and I really love. And not only that, have sort of shared our love for. We've talked about seeing Beyond the Lights together was like a very key early moment in our friendship.
That's a good point.
And all that sort of shit. And it was the one time we sort of went like, can we sort of change the thrust of the show and who we cover? And that we're essentially picking someone who is right now maybe starting to get issue checks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can we sort of try to use the
Right.
fact that people take our show somewhat seriously, or at least give it some weight, to but kind of push a filmmaker who is often not discussed in these terms into a conversation and to try to reckon with a body of work. And that was for a very big budget Netflix movie that was apparently watched by 8 billion people.
Big hit.
A totally real number.
Forever's Harder Than It Looks. In the Old Guard. Yeah. I think we just
And very
correctly
much-
anticipated that she did have her biggest project coming up. And
It did feel that way. We were sort of
so-
getting ahead of the thing, which we don't usually do.
Mhm.
It was also she had been in conversation for like doing one of the fucking Spider-Man spin-off movies for a while. Old Guard was her finally getting to make the action movie she wanted to make. And then this was almost immediately after Old Guard, this gets announced. This was a thing that had been in development for a long time.
Yes.
At one point, she was contacted to write and direct it, developing it, but she was doing Black and Silver, which was the Spider-Man
Silver
movie.
and Black, I believe. Yes.
Booey. And then years later, this comes back around to her with a script and an offer to direct.
Yes.
She's not doing the Old Guard sequel, which is coming out sometime next year.
Is it filming?
They have filmed it.
Yeah, all right.
I, in fact, was looking it up yesterday, missed the announcement that Henry Golding and Uma Thurman are in it,
That's cool.
along with the entire returning cast.
Should we do it? People would love that.
Yeah.
So Old Guard 2 directed by Victoria Mahoney.
She's a good director.
She's done
She
a
did
lot
a
of
movie called
TV.
Yelling at the Sky with Zoe Kravitz and Gabourey Sidibe. And then she did a lot of TV, and then she was the second unit director in Rise of Skywalker.
Yes.
Which was this big deal. And it was sort of like a lot of people like
She did the
McHugh,
Fortnite stuff.
J.J. Abrams. She did the Fortnite stuff. A lot of big blockbuster filmmakers have for a very long time sort of been boosting
She's
her
gotta
as like,
check
this is
her
someone
out.
who should get. In a way that I read an interview with Prince-Bythewood recently where she talked about Ryan Johnson being a really big advocate for her, sort of bringing her in to his process when he
for
was
Victoria
doing
Mahoney?
Last Jedi. No,
Oh, for Gina. Okay.
for Gina.
Sure.
when she was doing Old Guard, that she consulted him a lot and how to deal with a movie of this size. Here's a stat that I just kind of hadn't clocked. I was in one of the either New York Times piece or Hollywood Reporter piece. I was reading as much of the sort of recent Gina interviews around this movie coming out. We're talking about The Woman King today. Her new massive hit film. It is A+ cinema score. People are spontaneously breaking into applause breaks.
It's a crowd. It is
clearly
performed above expectations.
A people's
in every
favorite.
way.
It performed above expectations.
It's doing
I
great.
certainly feel in a upcoming month without a ton of major releases, it has a chance to really kind of hold on for
Have
a while
some
at
nice
the box
legs,
office,
yeah.
which I really hope for. I would love to see her continue working at this scale. But the thing she pointed out in this interview was, and I might be fudging the numbers a little bit here, Love and Basketball costs like $14 or $15 million, I think.
Okay.
Then Secret Life of Bees cost $11 million. Disappearing Acts, her TV movie, cost $10 million.
Right.
Beyond the Lights cost $7 million.
It's been going down.
She was like-
she made Beyond the Lights for 7. Yeah,
Which
I
is
think we talked about it.
Insane.
Yeah, it's very
Especially the scale of that movie actually feeling like it's representing
Even
award
though
shows
it-
and concert tours and a fucking famous person in a mansion and all this shit. Insane. So she was talking about in her stress leading up to the Old Guard, it was like, I've had a career where my budgets have only shrunk, which is the opposite of how this usually is supposed to work. And then Old Guard was a $70 million budget. Even with weird Netflix accounting,
It was an expensive movie.
10
by her
times what she had
standards,
gotten on her
yes.
previous film. And beyond that, like, you know, multiples beyond her most expensive film, which was her first film at that point, like 20 years earlier. And then this movie cost 50.
Yeah.
It cost 50, but with a lot of COVID difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
It's smaller than Old Guard, you know?
It doesn't feel that much smaller, does
It doesn't. I do
Yeah.
think you can, and I say this only in a way to give her credit. They've talked about, they filmed this movie in South Africa.
Yeah.
They start filming 3 weeks in, Omicron hits really fucking hard.
Yeah.
Like devastates.
It was because they started November 21. Yeah.
There was a question of whether the movie would ever resume production.
Right, because it was Omicron was there first. Remember, it was South Africa was where it
they were at
started.
like ground zero.
Yes.
And it like decimated them. I believe they were shut down for like 6 weeks.
Hmm.
She was not sure if the movie would ever come back. And when it did come back, they pretty much had to change every single aspect of how they made the film. Like in her mind, she was going to have twice as many extras in every scene.
Right.
Which is what you
Larger
expect from
scope,
this
larger
kind
scale.
of movie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Even just
big Lawrence of Arabia
the
style
crew,
movie. Yeah.
how many
yeah,
people
yeah.
are allowed on a set at any point in time changed dramatically. And I do think in ways that I give her credit for, you can sense at certain moments like she is being very smart about how to shoot and cover this to work around. And she even talked about like her choreography had to change. They did months of training with everyone before the film, but then, it becomes a lot more deliberate in terms of what you're allowed to call someone to do. It does feel like a big, expensive movie.
It does. Feels big, right?
Yeah.
It's going for old school Hollywood epic, I feel like. Like a big sort of heroic action war epic of the golden age of Hollywood.
Based around a historical figure.
The movie, I mean, look, it's really in dialogue with 1990 to 2000.
Braveheart, you're thinking.
Dances with Wolves.
Dances with Wolves, right.
Ending with Gladiator, I would argue. I feel like there's another big one I'm forgetting, but there's certainly a bunch of them in that run,
Braveheart is the movie this most reminded me of.
Yes.
And she has said huge inspiration for me.
Yeah.
I mean, Last of the Mohicans, I guess.
That's the other one I was thinking of. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
But then there's also movies you're forgetting, like Legends of the Fall. Movies that are not as good, so they
I
don't.
was
But
just citing those as the big boys.
I know, but
Yes.
that
was a real era.
that's what I'm saying. Like Legends of the Fall is not a good movie, but it has all the same ingredients of like big landscapes, sort of movie stars, a bit of everything, romance, drama, family, right? And just they don't make as many of those kinds of was sort of the Troy Kingdom of Heaven thing, like
That's
the
sort of post Gladiator run
we had
where I
too
feel
much
like it
swords and
shifts a
sandals.
little and it becomes a little muddied. Yeah.
Oh, I
And,
love
like,
these. Give me those.
Yeah, I'm giving you an Altoid. Ridley also is never able to hit it again, even though he tries to.
I mean, he made Robin Hood and I took too much.
You do Exodus, Kingdom of Heaven, Robin Hood, are like the 3 times he tried to do it. Exodus is the one where it's like, this is done.
Well, he has another one coming up.
Which is?
Napoleon.
Oh, right. But
The Patriot. Another kind of bad. Yes, Gladiator.
That's end of the run. But Ben also says to me when we're walking the movie, he's like, it's like Spartacus. And I'm like, right. And we talked about this in our Spartacus
Lawrence
episode.
of Arabia, Spartacus.
Pretty much up until the year 2000, this was the biggest kind of movie Hollywood could make.
Yeah.
Even if
what a better age. Sorry.
Right? It was just like you put movie stars along with like really fucking skilled technical actors in like giant landscapes.
Yeah.
And like period authenticity. And you tell these stories that, as you said, are like it's romance, it's drama,
but
it's
also,
action.
The special effect is scale.
Yes.
It's crowds.
Yes.
It's people charging at each other on a field. It's not energy beams and infinity stones.
It's a
Whatever.
scope.
I
Both.
just feel like it's like I'm a nerd who wished on a rabbit's foot, and then I got
We've
cursed
talked
with
about this
Marvel.
so many times. I mean, the whole fucking.
I even like these things, and
the
I think they
whole
should
fucking
stop.
pop culture landscape is now catered towards me, and I hate it. I hate it, and it makes me hate myself more in return.
It's very catered towards like 16-year-old me as well, where I'm like, why are you listening to him? He was stupid.
That guy was a fucking idiot.
He didn't know how good he had it.
Yeah.
It's like, why are characters like, can't characters like joke around all the time? Now I'm like, can we be serious for a
let's
minute?
Stop fucking looking at the camera.
We just constantly feel like Sully saying, "Can we get serious?"
Can we get serious?
No, it's a nightmare. Look, it's the line in Ghost World where Thora Birch says to Steve Buscemi, "Don't you want to meet a woman your age who shares your interests?" And he goes, "I hate my interests."
Yes.
And the difference is, what if every one of that guy's interests were dominating culture?
Yeah, man.
At least he's into like niche jazz 45s.
He's so weird. He's a cutie.
Great performance.
Oh, one of the best.
But yes, it is a thing. We are not going to talk about this much, but obviously, because I want to, in fact, move past this so we can just start talking about what the film is rather than what it isn't, right? But there has been some amount of discourse over the historical accuracy of this film, which is like, this film I do not think presents itself in any way as any sort of docudrama. It is very much in the fashion of movies we're talking about that are essentially creating romantic stories within a framework of history.
It doesn't have any, I couldn't remember this. It doesn't have any kind of sort of like based on true events, opening title card, right? Yeah.
There's something in the trailer,
Trailers don't count.
But it essentially
obviously this is based in history. It's not like it's completely made up, but yeah.
Well, it is basically, I believe from my research, and I say this as, pointedly, I am not going to try to present myself as someone who, because I read 2 Wikipedia entries and 3 think pieces, has a complete understanding of this thing, whereas I feel some people are doing that right now. But from my gathering, Boyega is pretty much the only character in this film who is a real person.
Correct. He is the only character who is based in, and that is almost troublesome for the movie because the guy he's playing, King Gezo, never decided to end slavery fully in his kingdom. They did close, I believe, at one point they did actually close the port. but there was still slavery going on in the kingdom and other places and all that.
Yes.
And like people think he more did it because he was pressured. You know, like there's things like that where it's like it's the triumphant end of this movie that is the most sort of like imagined or romanticized part of the story, and that is, you know, that is worthy of interrogation by people who know what they're talking about,
which we do not and will not pretend to do.
but there's things you can read, and I've been reading and you've been reading, and that's all fine, and people will read about, you know, but then of course there's also a more bad faith, you know, contingent who we don't need to
it's one of those things, you know, that makes talking about the fucking pop culture in any way. I just want to call out the piece that I read that I thought was really good was Julian Lucas in the New Yorker wrote a piece called Sisterhood and Slavery and the Woman King, which if you want a pretty measured, intelligent, well-researched sort of take on where this film relates to history, that is one I recommend, that I will not even try to summarize. But, you know, we're constantly combating this thing in being guys who fucking talk about popular culture for a living, that so often...
It's a living.
It is a living. The worst people on the internet weaponize things in bad faith to a point where it then becomes almost impossible to have a reasoned conversation about any of the issues with an actual thing because they are adding Pina Colada song lyrics to an IMDb page. The cornerstone of this for me is this notion that is getting perpetuated, and then we're closing the fucking book on this, that this movie is like taking a complicated history and whitewashing it into just pure escapist aspirational storytelling, which I do not think it is. I think this is a complicated movie. I think she is
obviously
telling a fictional story within a framework of a real societal, you know, sort of thing that happened, but not presenting to it as a retelling of history. And a lot of people seem to be comparing the trailer of this movie to a Wikipedia page and going, those two things don't resemble each other.
Sure.
To which I want to say, what fucking trailers have you seen that resemble the movies?
Let's not worry about the trailer.
Because this movie is, I think, among many other things, and you know, I think a lot of what we want to talk about here is where it fits into like the canon of Gina Prince-Bythewood's work, because one of the reasons why I think you and I are such big fans of hers and wanted to cover her and her movies on the show, because people don't sort of talk about her films in this way. Yeah. She has that thing that pretty much all great filmmakers have, where it's like, to some degree, they're telling variations on the same story over and over and over again. She has
have their specific fascinations.
Yeah, right. And things that are intrinsically personal, whether she's developing the material herself or it's something that's coming to her, the stories that she's connecting with, and she's talked a lot about in the gaps where she wasn't making films, it was because there wasn't anything she wanted to make. Or rather, she wasn't going to be allowed to make the thing the way she wanted to. She didn't want to do shitty things, dispassionate work, whatever. And this movie is so rife with all the concerns that have been, you know, explored in all of her films, I would say, and also the sort of strengths as a technical filmmaker that she's been developing. But so much of her work is about, I think she is as defined by being adopted as Spielberg is by his parents' divorce and the abandonment of his father, right? Her movies are so much about relationships to parents, chosen families versus given families.
Yes.
That's a huge fucking thing in her work.
Yeah.
And also, you know, and sometimes it's a literal thing and sometimes it's a more figurative thing of people being expected to fit into one space and wanting to exist in a different space.
Right.
Not just a space of what they want to do, but the community they want to exist in, the work they want to do, you know? Trying to find the place that maybe you were told you could not go into. And to that extent, like, this movie's whole dialogue about slavery, I think, is really invested in the moral gray area of, and you know, it's another thing of just like, is this movie sanitizing how brutal this army was, right? Which I don't think they are. I think they are portrayed as being fairly scary in a lot of ways.
Sure.
This is a film about a barbaric time on Earth, right?
Sure.
But I think a big part of this film is like, women at this moment in this culture have the choice to either become property through marriage the very least.
Yes,
or essentially turn yourself into a weapon in order to have your own agency.
Right. And
the only pathway to autonomy
this is right. It's
is
a
to hone
surprising
yourself into
pathway
a
to
ruthless
autonomy.
blade.
Yeah,
Right.
but not just that, but also, and you have to lock yourself away. You have to, or, not from everyone, but from, society. People can't look at you. You only have your sisters, warriors, and all that.
Right. Which,
pretty
look,
interesting.
there's a through line there between the Sana Lathan character's struggle to find herself a career as an athlete. Certainly the Old Guard is very much about this. And I would even say the Beyond the Lights is so much about that, her needing to create this pop culture figure, this sort of other person she can become in order to have a key to life, that becomes oppressive to her.
Let's talk about, let's A Woman King. It's produced by Maria Bello. We all know her. Season 4 of ER. That Prime Suspect remake where she had the hat.
We talk about that a lot, the hat, of course.
The Cooler.
The
History
Cooler.
of Violence, which she's actually
That's her best
absolutely
performance.
incredible in.
The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, which she's pretty
That's
much dog
That's
shit
a tough one. That's a tough beat.
A bad
Coyote
one.
Ugly.
Good. Generally a fan of hers.
I like Maria Bello a lot. And it's this strange story of she learned about the Agoge when she was like in Benin, which is the country that is part of, that the King of Dahomey is now. It encompasses what was part of the Kingdom of Dahomey.
And most of what we
learns
know
about
the Agoge is essentially what exists in folklore passed down.
And
stories.
some, European trader types who observed them.
But there was not a lot of tangible sort of fact-based accounting on them. But she just becomes kind of obsessed with how does this exist? How has no one made a movie about this?
And she's giving Viola Davis an award at some LA event at the Skirball Center. And pitches her on stage in front of the crowd, right? Is I know this is annoying, but while I have you.
She's I recently found out about this thing. There was this army in Africa
and you should be
at this
in
point in
it,
time.
right.
Imagine Viola Davis in this kind of movie.
And apparently everyone's yeah. I mean, I might be annoyed, but I mean, it seems that Viola Davis was intrigued.
I mean, it's 2013,
2015.
I think. 2015. So it's coming off The Help.
Let's see. That's a good question. Isn't The Help more 2013?
Yeah, I'm
When's
just
The Help?
wondering what that.
The Help is
Would have
20.
been.
No, The Help is 2011.
Wow.
So
Jesus.
2015. Well, Black Hat.
Hey.
I mean, that's good. But it's a year before Viola wins an Oscar.
Right.
That's Fences is 2016.
Yeah.
So Viola Davis is a major, serious, well-respected actress, but maybe I feel it's sort of post Fences. Because it's Widows and this,
Yes,
and to a lesser extent, the Suicide Squad movies are where it's Viola Davis is almost your movie star lead, right?
and
before then, that
you're
was
forgetting
less
the
of
other thing. The big thing in between is How to Get Away with Murder.
which that's 2014. So I guess that was already
Right.
on. And that was maybe
That was finally someone has framed her as a true
she's-
leading woman.
right.
She's
a
bankable.
big deal.
She's talked a lot about in a, I think, completely fair, just way that she still is not sort of thought of on the tier of someone like Meryl Streep.
Right.
Which obviously Meryl Streep's had a longer career, won more
Decades,
Oscars,
right,
whatever.
right.
But there is that thing where I feel very often Viola Davis is kind of taken for granted as much as she is viewed as national treasure. And also watching this movie, I kept on thinking about she is basically one of the most famous actors in America.
Yes, she's a very, very famous actor in person.
She's been nominated for so many Oscars. She's won the Emmy. She's won the fucking Tony. But you're also just she's been in so many things. Everyone pretty much knows her and likes her. No one argues Viola Davis is underrated. She just feels consummate
Or
fucking
overrated. Everyone's on board with Viola Davis. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, she has the Emmy. She has the
It's
she's
just
doing
one
great.
of these things where her doing a movie like this.
She's in Black Adam? What the hell?
It's Amanda Waller again.
Yeah, well, obviously.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Which look,
I hope
she
the
is
equilibrium
really good in those.
I really like her in the Suicide Squad movies. I just am annoyed about.
And I agree. And I almost feel that's the thing that finally gives her the cachet to make this movie, along with a couple other phenomenons we'll talk about in a
a
second.
little bit, but I think Widows too. Anyway, look. Well, so all right. So SCX
Yes,
is the first place they go, which sort of makes sense at that time.
because is Kathy Schulman running?
Correct.
Kathy Schulman, who produced Crash, and so won a weird Oscar,
Mhm.
is running STX at that moment in time.
Which is sort of a mid-major studio where maybe you could go and say like, hey, I have a movie that's not based on a superhero or not based on some franchise, but like, you know,
at
a
that moment they were
mid-sized
trying to be the
movie.
smaller studio.
Right.
And it's truly just kind of like Bello and
Viola
Viola
Davis.
going, we don't have a script.
Right. We just have this idea.
There should be a movie set in this period, in this world, about this army. Yeah.
Everyone turns it down. STX offers them $5 million, which is obviously not very much money
Yeah.
to make a movie this size.
Everyone's thing is you can do that as like an indie drama. There's no way this is commercial enough to be an epic on the scale you're talking about. You can't do this as an action film.
Davis mentioned this on. I went to the world premiere. Of
Yeah,
this.
bullshit. Ben is shaking his head. Yeah.
Like, yeah, that
Yeah, it's
doesn't make
bullshit.
sense.
I went to the world premiere of this film. I'm not going to brag, but
Humble
I was
brag.
at the world premiere.
Yeah.
In Toronto, and you know, Davis mentioned this when she was introducing the movie. Like, she talks about it a lot. How, you know, she has very dark skin, and how she feels like that's made it especially hard for her to be a movie star. And she says, like in press, like, oh, studios would be like, if you cast lighter skinned celebrities, things like that. You know, they wanted whatever Hollywood may perceive as more box office palatable actresses. Prince-Bythewood is approached, but she's busy on Silver and Black.
She says, when you have a script, come back to me.
Right.
I can't write this right now.
Obviously, that Silver and Black never came to fruition.
Yeah.
Then they meet with
Well,
Hannah
because
Ming.
they had to make way for Morbius.
Then they, yeah.
I mean,
Then they meet with
3 sides.
TriStar
Yeah.
and Nicole Brown, who I
Yes.
think is the person who she was on stage at TIFF, and she's like the sort of biggest sort of booster of this movie.
Right.
And the success of Black Panther,
This is the biggest
which
thing.
is the biggest thing they had,
Right.
because
the
the
Dora
Dora
Milaje,
Milaje,
right, are very much based on, yes,
on this like
Theodosia,
history.
yeah.
And so I guess that's enough. They get the $50 million budget.
Right. It finally
essentially.
becomes a thing where like Black Panther is so beloved and the Dora Milaje stuff is so beloved that the idea of getting to make this movie for $50 million with an Oscar star feels like a pretty safe bet. You watch the trailer and it's very much sort of advertising itself as almost like this is the real Black Panther, you know?
Yeah.
There was that vibe. The trailer is a lot more conventional than this movie is, I would argue. Or
sure.
at least a lot more modern.
Yeah, the movie is conventional in ways I love.
In an old
but
Hollywood
it's kind of
way.
old fashioned,
Right. It's sort of framing it as more of a modern.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Yeah.
And as you say, shot in South Africa, plagued by COVID problems.
Dana Stevens, who
it was
the
written by
screenwriter,
Dana
not
Stevens.
Dana Stevens, friend of the show, past and future guest, but Dana Stevens, friend of the show, a screenwriter behind For Love of Game,
For the Love of the Game, and what else has she done? The City of Angels.
A weird filmography.
It is a weird filmography, but she's also, I think, one of those people who's just kind of around.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's sort of just a vet.
But they come to her.
She was married to Michael Apted.
Oh, really? I don't know if I knew that.
Mm.
They come back to Gina with that script.
Yeah.
Gina talks about she goes in for her pitch meeting and cries during it. Was like, I just blew it. They're not going to hire the woman who cries.
Right.
And Viola Davis was like, that's the moment.
Right.
If I saw someone who cared that much about what they were doing.
So, she got
And
like
had this-
emotional during the
Right.
meeting.
yeah.
Okay.
And was like, A, that she cared that much. B, that what Viola Davis recognized as the strength required to be that vulnerable in a meeting like that, where that is not usually valued. And she was like, I'd seen the old guard,
Sure.
and I could see that she was ready, and that she
Right,
had
she
the
has
passion behind
some
it. Of,
action
like,
movie
this
chops
is,
here.
This is,
Right.
I'm ready to make my fucking epic.
And they, you know, every time we talked about Gina, you know, down to her really like being on Sanaa Lathan's ass about being good at basketball for
Yep.
Love and Basketball. It's like everyone's got to do, you know, 90 minutes of weight training every day, 3.5 hours of fight training every day. You know, like they all had to learn all this stuff.
This is a movie that is very talking about the other, through lines throughout her career. It is. I was saying to Ben, you can very much tell this is an action movie made by an athlete. In the same way, you can tell the difference when a musical is directed by a choreographer.
Right.
This is someone who actually understands how the body works, who understands movement, is thinking about how they themselves would do it, and is coaching her actors and filming and cutting it from that perspective.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, it's one of those things where you're like, everyone in this film is clearly doing this fighting, right?
Right.
As much as I think
They
a lot
did
of the action
a lot of their own stunts and all
is
that.
more edited than Old Guard, but I think that was because of practical realities.
Sure, but I think the
Um,
action's really good.
You're not seeing stunt doubles. Like even if they're more pieces, you're seeing their faces in almost every shot. But they are not conventionally ripped in like a superhero way. I was saying this to Ben.
They're fit.
We're so conditioned to the idea of like jacked people on screen looking jacked in this very sculptural way that is not actually very practical. You know, like
Sure.
The Rock does not move very well.
No, he's very big.
It's
yeah.
the
no,
post
right.
Stallone, Schwarzenegger thing that now has gone out of control, where every superhero has to have their like superhero diet and build like an aesthetic body that is not really athletic,
Right.
as much as it is just like all these weird things of people dehydrating themselves so the veins pop.
Well, that's what you were saying. Yeah, the veins thing is so disturbing to me.
And this is a movie where it's like, oh, these people are built like Olympic athletes.
Yeah,
Their
they're-
body
right.
is like trained for these specific purposes. It is not like performative muscles.
There's also different body types.
Yes.
There's really very different body types
Yes.
for different fighting styles.
Yes.
It's nice to see. It's not everyone's just jacked
But
and
you're
uniformly.
never questioning that these people can cause this damage.
Yeah.
You know?
The Woman King. I saw it at Toronto
Oh, right.
at the Roy Thompson Hall.
Do you want
Wow.
to save your story of your Toronto Airbnb? Because you've pinned that you want to talk about that. at some point
Airbnb
this
story
episode.
can go later,
Okay.
or can even go on. Well, we'll see about the Airbnb story. But no, but I did attend the premiere of this movie. It was at the Roy Thompson Hall, which is this gigantic concert hall. It's
Sure.
honestly a terrible place to see a movie, but
Congrats.
you have to go see movies at this place sometimes if you're going to the galas. And usually when you're going to a premiere, the director will come out
Mhm.
and everyone's kind of like, all right, but you got to clap, but you're kind of, especially people like press like me who have to see a lot of movies, you're sort of like, let's make this quick.
Sure.
And so you always appreciate what's like, but they'll come out, they'll usually introduce the cast, and then they'll say like, and we'll talk later, we'll do a Q&A after or something like that. And you're like, great. Gina comes out, God bless her.
Mhm.
She brings out the whole cast. I mean, who obviously all look incredible.
Yeah.
Imagine the cast of this movie basically just in like ball gowns. They all look fucking insane.
Sure.
But then she's like, and I'm going to shout out the crew of this movie. And I'm like, oh my God, I have a dinner reservation. But she starts shouting out the crew of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Polly Morgan, the
Sure.
DP, right? Terrence Blanchard.
Yeah.
By the way, I was sitting next to all of them because I was like, that's where I was. So that was the costume designer.
Terrence Blanchard is best known as Spike Lee's composer.
He's a jazz
Did
musician.
the
He's
score on
incredible.
this. Yeah, but in film, I'm saying that's
Absolutely.
the bulk of his body of work.
Costume designer, editor, almost everyone a black woman, which is pretty unusual.
Yeah.
And she was not like putting a fine point on that or anything,
Yeah.
but it was very obvious as she's shouting everyone out. You're like, God damn, like this is a movie mostly made by women. They all seem to really love each other. There was a lot of love in the room.
Mhm.
There was a lot of, which, everyone's always very happy at these premieres, except for the Lucy in the Sky premiere, one of the most insane things I ever witnessed, where Noah Hawley came out and was like, look, they're not all good. And then John Hamm was like clapping him on the back and was like, it'll be okay, buddy. We were like, that's your intro?
It's like I bet Griffin's gonna like it, but we'll be too embarrassed to ever mount a defense.
But usually people, but it was like a really good atmosphere, and it was really, and then she let Viola talk.
Sure.
Well, not let, but then she was like, Viola, do you want to send Viola
Viola
talk
Davis, who is
about
an
this?
incredible public speaker. Like
Exactly,
anytime Viola
a very
Davis has ever made a
impressive, sort of
speech,
weighty speech about,
right?
how
you're like,
she
I
was
wish
like,
any politician was able to inspire this much.
how like as a little girl she was put down and she was never like and all this stuff. So everyone's really jacked up by the time the movie starts. Then the movie starts with like the Woman King, and then they come out of the fucking grass,
Right.
and start just like chopping people up, and like everyone was just going ballistic.
Right.
So I'm just saying, I saw this movie in a very positive atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so I walked out of it like very thinking like that was great,
Sure.
but also thinking like, God, like, does that play as well?
Right. You
At
hope.
like, fucking AMC on a Tuesday afternoon, like, because it's such a big sort of brassy crowd pleasing movie.
Yeah.
And then I've just been so thrilled that like that does seem to be the reaction just generally, like the A+ cinema score. Like multiple people I know have seen it with packed houses where people were kind of like, cheering and clapping.
Sam Rogal, friend of the show,
Yeah.
past and future guest, texted me because I got a lot of texts from like friends of the show and blankies who went to see it opening weekend and were kind of like amped. You know,
Yeah.
you listen to our show, you spend a fucking month or so talking, living with the director, you start to get personally invested and you get excited when you have a fucking win, right? And Regal texted me, I saw a half-empty afternoon screening and it got 4 applause breaks.
Hell
Which
yeah, there you
basically,
go.
look, this movie did well. There are more crowded screenings where I'm hearing stories like that.
Right.
We saw an afternoon showing that was not super full, but it did get a couple like quiet
People were
applause
still
breaks.
pretty into it.
It is
Sure.
like I kept on looking at like the only other people who were in our row were like 2 older women who were like pumping their fists at multiple moments. People are really loving this thing. It got an A+ cinema score, which is a thing that
one other movie got it this year.
what's the other one?
Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, it happens like twice a year.
Yeah.
Basically.
It's because that means that everyone walking out of the theater is like A+, you know, because
Right.
it's an average.
It means
right.
that everyone walking out of the theater is basically like that exceeded my expectations
right.
of what made me want to see this movie in the first place.
Right.
It's exciting.
It's exciting. It's a fun movie. I personally think, I know this is a boring note, but there's just a plot that I could lift right out of it. It would make the Looney movie leaner and meaner, and I'd be happy about it.
The sort of
The
half romance with the Portuguese
romance.
boys. Yeah.
I would just lift it out. But
Yeah.
I also understand and I think it would just lift right out. It would just lift
I do too.
whoop.
Yep.
But I understand the feeling of like, this is an old fashioned epic. It should have a romance. It should
Yes.
have these kinds of swooning moments. It should have this kind of like attention to the narrative.
I
like,
also like I give them credit for not going like full fucking John Smith Pocahontas with it, you know?
well, sure. Yeah, it certainly could have been
It's-
more detrimental to the movie.
Right. It feels like a pretty contained thing that is more used as an exploration of ideas and to be able to check off some of those boxes. The thing I was not prepared for is how much of this movie is the look, we're going to get into spoilers in this episode, but how much of it really comes into the mother-daughter relationship.
Right, sure.
Which is really the emotional crux of the movie.
That's the big emotion of the movie. But
The other thing I was kind of surprised by is like this is kind of Viola Davis's like Sean Connery performance.
I
where
like
it's like
this.
movie
on.
is more of an ensemble than I was prepared for it to be.
Me too. I mean, I was sort of having the widow's reaction which I love that
Right.
movie, but I was like, once again, she's given herself this very locked down,
Yes.
lead
Yeah.
in quotes, but like she's surrounded by an ensemble that is popping
Yes,
and she's almost given herself like a less rewarding role.
she rules in this movie.
but she's really good at it.
But even with Widows, she is more the narrative spine of the thing, even though she's allowing everyone else to be more colorful.
Right.
than
In
she
Widows,
is.
she's really locked down.
Yes.
Like that's like a really contained.
Right.
This is different.
This is like really kind of the narrative jumps between the 4 of them,
Sure,
right?
so
Sheila
her-
Atim,
Go ahead.
Uh,
Sheila Atim,
Lashana
Lashana Lynch, and
Lynch.
Thuzo Dadu, who
Yes.
is she's
she's
she
from
was
the
in the
Underground
Underground
Railroad. And this is her
Railroad.
first movie ever.
Yeah, I guess so. She's done a lot of TV, but I guess it's
Yes.
her first movie. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Which is wild. But it really is the 4 of them and sort of them in different 2-person configurations.
A little bit. And then Boyega obviously as this sort of,
Yeah, the
character they have to
Portuguese
deal
guy
with.
as a side character. Right.
Right. Hero
They're-
finds
they're
Tiffin.
The
He was
main
there.
4. He's
Shout
the
out to-
other one.
Shout
isn't
out to
he?
Hero finds Tiffin. Yeah, he's the villainous
Right,
one.
right.
But him sitting, so I'm in box B at the Roy
Yes.
Thompson Hall. If anyone wants to look at the Roy Thompson Hall seating map,
I do
I'm
not.
in box B. So I'm sitting with the crew mostly. I'm sitting with Shirley Lee, friend of the show, as well.
Shout out.
Yeah. But then in box C,
Mhm.
the next box over is Gina and the actresses.
Sure.
And I was actually sitting next to Gina. We were across an aisle. So I kept watching her watch the movie because
Yeah.
if you're sitting next to a director,
You want to see.
I want to see,
Yeah.
because obviously she's seen it.
Right.
So I want to know, like, is she watching the
But
audience?
it's like watching a parent watch their kid at a school recital.
Right.
Or
Is she
whatever.
laughing at
Right.
the laugh moments? She was just locked in,
Yeah.
but not expressive. It was
Yeah.
interesting. But she was just funny. Hero surrounded by these like absolutely gorgeous black
Yeah.
women who were like all looking crazy. And he was just like, hi. Like, anyway.
Ray,
good
Ray
for him.
finds his nephew?
He's certainly a Fiennes. He is, yes, nephew to both Rafe and Joseph
Okay.
Fiennes.
Son of the 3rd sibling?
And son of Martha Fiennes,
Oh.
who's a director.
It's that Connery thing, especially like, the last 10, 15 years of his career, I'd say sort of Untouchables as the inflection point, where it's just like, I will lend the star power, the gravitas, the
But
genre credibility to this thing.
But I'm in my 50s or over at this point.
Right. And you can
Mm.
build an ensemble around me or put me with a younger star, and I'm essentially like legitimizing other actors by putting them in my orbit, you know?
Yeah.
Not that these actors need to be legitimized, but you know what I'm saying? Like, this movie immediately makes all three of them far more into movie stars than they were before. Lashana Lynch, who's one of these bizarre cases of, like, I was talking about with Ben, someone who sort of had this, like, incredible reputation in theater and then immediately starts getting thrown into blockbusters.
Yeah.
In a slightly, not her fault, cart before the horse way, where you're just like, everyone's betting on this person really big.
A little bit. So
Right.
It's tough, or not tough, but a lot of pressure.
This
has
is
been put on
definitely the
her
movie
early.
where I'm like, oh, I get it.
Oh, she's so good in this movie.
This is like the part.
she
She's like
also,
incredible.
she does have the most fun role.
Yes.
She's
Yeah.
the fun one.
Yeah.
Right?
She is.
Because, like, obviously, Naniska is the leader,
Right.
the advice giver, this, you know,
Right.
and then Nawi is the young one who's
She's
impetuous and breaks the rules.
But she basically is the protagonist of the movie. She's
kind of the
kind
protagonist,
of the
or
audience surrogate. Right. Yeah.
You know, Amenza, who is the Sheila team character, and that actress is wonderful, and I'm loving that she's everywhere all of a sudden. But
2 shots in Pinocchio. Did you catch her in
2
that?
shots in Pinocchio. She's in Doctor Strange for 5 minutes. Like, you remember?
She gets a lot of close-up reaction shots in Doctor
She
Strange.
does, I
and
think, because
believe-
she's such a striking actress.
well, yeah, that's why I was.
Oh, you think she was
who
cut
the
out?
fuck is this person? Yes, there's the fucking Green Minotaur who's also all over the merchandise for Doctor Strange and does nothing in the movie. And I've heard from a lot of people that there were entire plot lines with the 2 of them that were cut out. I believe.
That makes sense.
I think she was supposed to, she has weirdly high billing in the movie.
Sheila Team is just a
Yeah.
really, really accomplished British theater actor, and I feel like Hollywood
Isn't that Lashana
has,
Lynch zone as well?
yeah,
where
Hollywood
it's
has
like
just discovered, and it's
Disney's like just
come,
throwing
right.
everything at her. But
Um,
like, what a fucking good showcase for
Lashana.
for both of them.
Well, for her too,
Yeah.
but Sheila Team playing the the wise counselor, the
Yes.
right hand woman, the
Right.
sort
Yeah,
of
sort of second in command.
right, the
Yeah.
cool saucer under the hot coffee, right?
Yeah.
Like she's sort of the one and then Izogi is the fun one. She's the whatever. I don't
She's
know.
kind of badass.
She's a fucking badass.
She's the only person who seems to get enjoyment out of her life, you know?
yeah.
'Cause Sheila seems like such a functionary, and as you said, the Viola Davis character is so clamped down the entire film, and as the movie goes on, we start like revealing her literal and emotional scars, right? But when she starts out the movie, it is like that opening shot where she rises out of the grass. It's the thing. It's why I think Suicide Squad is kind of the guarantor that allows her to do this, not just because Viola Davis wasn't someone that was maybe being thought of in an action movie context before doing fucking DC movies, even though her character is not the action character.
Right.
But the other thing is, the thing that is impressive about her in the DC movies is that she just is able to like turn on that fucking sociopath scare.
That stuff is
We're in a
cool. Like when
dialogue
she
scene,
goes
you're like,
around
is this
shooting people.
Terrifying woman in the world.
The other thing with her in those movies is that she somehow fits into the silliness of them without being silly.
Yes.
And it's sort of crucial for that character to not be silly. Like, because obviously these superhero movies, everyone's always like,
Right.
hey, you better go get Hawkman. Hawkman, am I right? What is he, a Hawkman?
Right.
Where I come from, there's no such thing as a Hawkman. There's just hawks and men. You're like, oh my God. But she never does that. She's
Right.
very serious. She talks about all this stuff seriously. I don't know if Amanda Waller says like Enchantress has breached, Sector 3
Yeah.
or whatever, but she can say that and you're not just like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. You're like, yeah, Enchantress, I guess, has breached Sector 3.
I mean, this is part of her big, like, fucking, you should pay me as much as Meryl Streep monologue that went viral years ago, where it's just like, she's like, I can do literally anything.
She kind
And
of
it's one of those things that doesn't feel like a brag. She's just like, I went to Juilliard. I am like such a technically competent actor. I believe I have proven myself in every genre, in every size role, It's one of those things that doesn't feel like woohoo, like sort of like know your value shit. It's just an actual honest account of just like, here are the tangible results of my career, and I'm still not sort of considered in this realm. And not being able to get a movie like Woman King financed for so long, But it is that thing where like when she rises out of the grass, you're just like, oh, she knows how to very subtly make herself the most intimidating person on the planet.
pretty cool.
I think her eyes say
very
so much.
intense glare.
She has some of the most expressive eyes of any actor working today. But the thing that's incredible about her is that it's like entirely behind the eyes. Like she does not actually emote with her eyes in a performative way. It's truly just all back there. She talks about, I've said this before because I love it. But she talks about in interviews how her entire approach as an actor is that she wants to be like a cat.
I think I remember this.
That she's like, if you study a cat, there's nothing more compelling than watching a cat and trying to figure out what they're thinking and why they're doing what they're doing, because cats are really inscrutable, as opposed to a lot of animals like dogs that are more expressive and emotionally needy.
Wait,
and
here,
whatever.
I have the quote. It's actually from David Mamet. It's interesting. Do you want me to read it? I mean,
Sure.
she's citing David Mamet.
Sure.
If you're looking at an actor on stage with a cat, who are you going to look at? The actor or the cat? The cat, because the cat is just being a cat. It's sort of a funny line.
She's expounded on this more.
Basically,
She's talked
like,
about how she literally studies cats to
rather than feeling like you're acting,
Right.
just being an entirely natural performer.
Which, like, I think the expressiveness in her eyes, or that whole thing where you're just like, you watch her, and her big breakout obviously is Doubt, where she just has this like fucking 5-minute demolition, right?
Doubt is, I guess, it's where she gets her first Oscar nomination.
Right.
Obviously, the first thing I noticed her in is Solaris.
Soderbergh and Clooney were big boosters of hers for years. She talks about that they pretty much gave her a career for like a decade plus.
She's in 3 Soderbergh movies before Solaris, which is Out of Sight, Traffic, and Ocean's 11, but she has small roles in all of them.
Beginning of Ocean's 11, she's the parole officer voiceover.
Yes. But also, she's a social worker in Traffic. She's she's in like one scene Out of Sight.
I believe Clooney paid for her wedding.
Hell yeah. Good
She's
for you,
like,
George.
they were the two people who really were just like, you should be a much bigger movie star. We're going to keep using you.
And then in 2002, she has these 3 roles. She's really, really good in Far From Heaven. It's a fairly small role, but it is an incredibly impressive performance. She's in Antoine Fisher, which is like a flawed movie, but she had like a really big part, like big, I mean, acting wise.
Yeah.
And then I mean, Solaris is like one of my favorite movies of all time. I think her performance in it's still like my favorite Viola Davis performance. I think she's so incredible in that movie. But it's a huge flop. But that is probably her big calling card for like, look, here I am. I'm all over this movie, blah, blah, blah. But then it's like, she's not in another. I think she starts to do more TV and stuff.
Yeah.
But her next credit is Get Rich or Die Trying. She's Grandma. Have not seen that. That's the 50 Cent movie.
I remember.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the movie itself.
But
I know
remember
I saw it.
The name Get Rich or Die Trying.
Oh, yeah.
She's a small part in Syriana. Again, that feels like the sort of Soderbergh Clooney universe, right? The Architect. What the hell is The Architect?
I could not tell you.
It doesn't matter. Not a big movie. She's apparently has a small part in World Trade Center. She's in Disturbia. She played a lot of cops.
This is the thing. I mean, she's like
played a lot of detectives.
She's talking, like, I played enough cops, nurses,
right,
social workers. Like this was how she was paying her rent for a long time, and occasionally, on a good project. But Solaris is the only time she was really kind of maybe given a meaty role in a movie like that.
The other thing I am forgetting is that she did win a Tony for King Hedley II, I believe. And that was in like 2001. That was like a featured actress Tony. So that's a big deal.
She's in the zone where she's very much
then
an
she won another one for
actor.
Fences.
And you're like, there are all these directors and actors and movie stars who are just like, this person's the shit. We should get them on set. If you can get her for one scene, it's worth getting, but is not getting the roles, is one of these people, like, very often the case where you're just like, on stage, they can play anything. They're, taken seriously and given real meat. And in film, they're often playing these sort of functionary roles.
Right. But she's always good. And
she's always good.
You see her in one of those movies before she was a bigger deal, you're always like, God damn, Viola
Consummate
Davis.
professional, and just has a different energy than anyone else in film. It is that weird sort of like, it's that thing that I think very often makes movie stars where you're like, this person's holding something back. In every single performance of hers, I do believe there is that quality of just like, what is she not telling me, right? There's something elusive about her. And she can be funny, she can be charming, she can be supportive, she can be scary, she can be whatever, She can play high status or low status, but it always feels like she's not showing you all of her cards. Doubt is the one where Oprah Winfrey campaigned for that part really fucking hard.
Interesting.
And John Patrick Shanley was like, you don't understand how good this woman is. And then when Oprah sees the movie, she not only is like, you're right, but she brings Viola Davis on her show, and she's still like, if you don't nominate for an Oscar, you're fucking insane.
It's incredible.
It's 5 minutes where she just like destroys the fucking movie.
She fucking kicks
in a
Meryl
film
Streep's
with like
ass.
Amy Adams, Meryl Streep, and Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah, well, they're all fucking asleep at the shop in that movie, in my opinion.
I think Adams is great in that movie.
She's pretty good. I mean, that character is a little difficult. But
I think she's
pretty
great in
good.
that
Yeah.
I know you don't like that movie.
No, it's a horrible movie.
But that's the one where it's just like,
Have we? Now I'm looking. Have we never covered? No, we did Black Hat.
we did Black Hand, we did Squib Squab Squab.
Right. Yeah, we did Suicide Squad.
That's
But
why I feel the need to do more Viola.
Yeah, we've
context,
never
'cause,
talked about a different. Yeah, because
Yeah.
no, we haven't. Yeah, this is sort of the first. I mean, she's not a lead in Black Hat. She's a supporting character in that movie.
Yeah.
This is her first she's sort of a lead in Suicide Squad. Did we
There's
talk
shit
about
like
her in that
there's
movie?
shit like Don't Back Down.
Well, that won't back down. That's
sorry.
actually that's an offensive movie. I hate
Yeah.
that movie.
Widow's obviously one of your favorite movies
Widow's
of the last 10
amazing.
years.
Widow's incredible. I think she's incredible in Fences. I
Yeah.
think that movie is wonderful, but I love that play, and I just love putting those plays on screen. I loved Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, honestly, which she's amazing in as well.
But Help gets her the lead actress nomination, sort of puts her into a different position in terms of like story weight, what can be carried. The movie's obviously a big hit. She kind of maybe misses winning the Oscar by like a hair, but then also talks about after that movie, she was just like, I want to really fucking take control over what I'm doing. She sort of talked about the elements of The Help that she thought were counterproductive
Sure.
culturally.
Yeah.
And just being like, I don't need to do stuff strategically anymore in that kind of way. And I want to use whatever force I can to like change the types of stories that people like me get to be at the center of. Because the other thing is she's getting increasingly famous at an age where a lot of actresses get phased out.
Yeah, and there's an interview Matt Patches did with a friend of the show, past and future guest, did with Gina, where he talks about at one point. Let me find the quote. Viola saying, while they were doing rehearsal, why are we hiding that I'm 56 years old? I
Right.
should be 56 years old in this movie. I guess she was playing a younger character in the script. They weren't dealing with the reality of her being like a very aged warrior.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, I want to own my age on screen, which is obviously, I mean, she looks pretty good for 56.
Oh, she does. But it's also
I'm not going to
like,
look that good when I'm 56.
when you see a movie like this,
I can only hope
Yes.
to look that good.
when you see a movie like this with a woman over 50 in the lead role, it's almost always something like Jamie Lee Curtis returning, Sigourney Weaver returning. It is people who did this when they were young and have sort of legendary status within their genre and get to come back and kick ass again. It's very rare that at 56, someone's now given the chance to be the lead of an action movie.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
And a movie that's really banked and sold on her. It's not like she's incidentally the main character. It's like, as we're saying, this movie is more of an ensemble than it's advertised as being because they're selling it as a Viola Davis vehicle because that's what's exciting to people.
But the main poster, does have the 5 of them.
It does.
All build together, looking great.
I'm just saying, the trailer throws her name up twice.
Well, this trailer you're obsessed with.
I'm
He
just
loves
saying,
this trailer.
they're aware that it's just like, oh, Viola Davis
She's
is,
his name.
yeah, big ass name. David?
Yeah.
Ching, 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 ching.
What's that sound?
That sound, David, that I just did many, many times, is the sound of another batch of sales happening on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business.
Oh, that's why I'm smiling, because Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big businesses. So upstarts and startups and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed.
Maybe you're trying to sell palm oil. Maybe you're trying to start a palm oil business.
That's good. That's a worthy cause.
A far more humane trade.
Right. Well, it's a journey of endless possibility. Would you say that?
I would absolutely say that you took the words right out of my mouth.
And success is a million milestones on a forever evolving path. Huh. Fascinating. Very interesting. We use Shopify over here at Blank Check, and
We do.
We use it to sell all kinds of things. T-shirts, sure, but also, Comedy Point coins and
Pins, spatulas. We're going to have a special Talk in the Walk item at the end of this year.
yeah, what is it? Do you know what it is?
Yeah, we know what it is. We'll tell you off mic.
You've either told me and I hated it, or I forgot, or you didn't, tell
Or you
me.
loved it.
Or I loved it. But that's true. Shopify is really good. It powers millions of businesses from first sale to full scale. You can reach customers online across all kinds of social networks. They've got all kinds of integrations: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more.
You gain insights as you grow.
All the rates, conversion rates, profit margins, all kinds of reports that you can look at.
It's more than a store. Shopify grows with you.
Yes, I'm hearing the sirens in the background of your audio, Griffin. That's probably the cops are coming to get you because you're getting such a good deal.
Yes, exactly. David, you have me dead to rights.
Yes. Look, go to shopify.com/check for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/check right now. Shopify.com/check.
Do it.
The Woman King, set in the 1820s in Dahomey, which is in West Africa.
Yeah.
Now been part of Benin.
Could we shout out specifically on the map just so people kind of get a sense? Because I had to look it up, and it's like kind of Western Africa, but like I guess like next to Nigeria, right?
So you got around there Nigeria, Togo, Ghana, the Ivory Coast, all
So
that.
it's like where it like sticks out, like that hump. It's like on the southern part of it.
Leniska is the leader of the Agoji. Is that how you say it?
I believe so.
An all-female group of warriors.
I mean, I mispronounced my own name, so I'm assuming that I'm messing up everything this entire episode. Yeah.
Forgiveness, please, for anything I mispronounce, obviously.
Yeah.
Who, in history, I believe part of the reason that there was this warrior fighting force was that these countries were losing so many men in war and to the slave trade and things like that, that there was, I guess, more of an opportunity where they were like, we need warriors. Like, we can think about training women to fight.
I'll say this too, like every time we do a proper war movie on this podcast, my brain breaks because I'm an idiot and a child, and war makes no sense to me. But when you watch a movie set in like an era like this, I'm like, well, yes, this makes sense. I understand in this era if it's literally about like we have to protect our fort. Other people want to invade our fort. You have to train people to defend it. War is literally
you said this is a more barbaric age, and I almost wanted to be like, Griff, we still live in a barbaric age.
We do.
I know, but
you know what I'm saying? The difference is that when I watch something like Paths of Glory, and I'm like, the barbarianism is now dressed up in men in corner offices with like a risk board going like, would it be clever if I'm
That's
like,
what they did.
Why isn't this a conference call? Whereas in Woman King, I'm truly like, I don't believe society has means to settle these things other than a bunch of people come to attack your fucking place to steal your stuff and you have to train people to defend the place. I'm like, I get this. I don't like it. I'm
Dahomey,
it's not where I live
at the time,
I get it.
Was a tributary state to the Oyo Empire, which was a larger West African country, kingdom, whatever, which is made up of a lot of Nigeria now. And so they are dealing with that. That is their general enemy in this movie, I would say. Usually they are fighting the Oyo warriors, right?
Yeah. Who is the main actor with the earring who is sort of central?
He fucking rules.
I mean, that guy
is so good as the villain in this.
I know.
I mean, truly contemptible.
Like, what a fucking look, though, man.
Yeah. Yes.
I believe the character is called Oba, right?
Yes.
And the actor's name is Jimmy Odukoya. I don't know him that well. Let's see. I mean, he's got a bunch of credits to his name on IMDb, but mostly movies I don't recognize.
It is a thing this movie does that I think is actually pretty.
He's a Nigerian actor, and it seems like he mostly works in the Nigerian industry. He fucking
that character poster is good.
He's just so like physically imposing, but also just like seething with like confidence. You know what I mean? Like, and not just like evil. Like, he's not just some guy where you're just like, well, this is just an evil guy.
No.
Not that he's a good guy, to be clear.
No good, very
he
bad.
does many, but also just like that, like brimming warrior confidence, where he's just like, I am indestructible in battle, right?
Yes.
And he's got the huge fucking earring, like the horn in his ear, that's like so cool.
Yeah. It is a thing I think this movie is astute about that speaks to it being having a more complicated view of history than I think some people reduce it to, even though it is very much, fictional. That this movie is keyed into like everyone was just fighting everyone at this time.
Well,
set in the 1820s.
Yes, they're all fighting. Is I guess yes. These kingdoms are all at war, and often they will take prisoners of war, and that that is who's getting sold into the Atlantic slave trade, which is booming in the 1820s, sadly.
England, Portugal, Spain.
Yes.
All the major European,
Those
France,
fuckers,
all those fuckers are participating in the Atlantic slave trade.
Those are the stories that are more often told, whether correctly or not. But also, it's just like domestically within this country, there is a slave trade as well, and these
Throughout
regions are all
history.
fighting each other. These kingdoms are all fighting each other. Everyone's just fucking fighting and doing bad shit to everyone.
Yes, sure. Well, but they are a tributary state is the point. Like
Yes.
they are trying to free themselves from having to pay tribute to the Oyo, which is like the current relationship between those countries. That is like the main like conflict in this movie, I would say, right? Is that Nanisca, who's the leader of the Dahomey Amazons, the Agoge, and Gezo, who is the king, the new king, a fairly young, ambitious king.
Hot.
He's
I would
very
I would go as far as
hot.
saying
Looking
hot.
great.
Hot king.
They are like, maybe we can, actually push back and like, liberate the kingdom from having to pay money and prisoners to the Oyo, right? Like that's the main thing they want to do.
Yeah.
Nanisca, on top of that, is like, we really should exit slavery. We really should not be selling.
She's
people.
like, I think time's up. It's coming for slavery.
And Gezo has
Let's
this
get
thing
out.
where he's like, we don't sell our own people. We don't, it's only prisoners we capture, right? Like that's his sort of rationalization of it, which I think was the common,
Yeah.
like that's how this all worked.
She's like, look, I think this is going to age really poorly.
He talks about, is it his brother who is the former king?
Who sold his mother?
Right. And he's like, my brother was much worse and he was selling our own people.
Right.
and
It's
all
that scene where he meets the Portuguese guy whose mother was a member of the Dome.
Yeah.
And they're like just casually swapping the stories of like the slavery they've experienced in their own families.
Right.
Yeah.
And
As men.
Right.
It's affected both women in their lives.
right.
Right. And also the frame of device of how we meet the main young character in this movie is also this thing of her father trying to find someone to
Trying
sell
to
her
marry
off
her
to.
off,
As,
right.
It's like
Yeah.
in one way or another.
Yes, there is certainly little independence available to women in this world.
And when Boyega talks about like, I'm thinking maybe we pull out of the slave thing, the argument to him is like, not only like, hey, look around you, you got good shit going. Do you really want to cut off the tap, right? But B, this notion of like, you want your people to prosper. It is this thing that is very much just fucking humanity basically stays the same without time. The same way that we just like throw people into the fucking gears of capitalism, where it's like not only the very people at the top, but the people that they're serving, basically saying like, can you allow like the top 20% of people to live a more luxurious life if you throw 30 people into the grinder?
Right. If you just sort of turn your,
You turn your head and you just go like, I don't know, it's a fucking...
Yeah, and he's, and she's, and the thing that is rooted in history is that there's two things that are fascinating to me. One is that the way the politics of the kingdom is structured, where it's like the king is the absolute ruler and what he says goes, like any, kingdom, king ruled country. But his advisors is this mix of like his warriors, including the Agoji, and his wives, of whom he has various wives who are sort of seem to be like domestic counselors, or like they have influence as well.
Yeah.
And so he's sort of like taken info from all of them. And like this seems to be true in history, that at least at some point the Agoji pushed for like, let's emphasize palm oil trade, right? Well, we can be farmers, right? Yeah. And that like the kingdom at least attempted that and maybe then swerved away from it. So that's what she's pushing. She's like, no more slavery. We can be farmers. We can, emphasize palm oil.
Yeah.
And I'll help you accomplish that by throwing off the yoke of the Oyo, we can do this.
Right.
And he's spending the most of the movie. He is the most fascinating character to me in a way because he's not stupid or smart.
Yes.
Or whatever. Like he doesn't seem like entirely out to lunch.
It is really
but he
nice
needs to be kind
see.
of flattered and massaged and kind of nudged in the right direction.
It's nice to see Boyega in the pocket.
He's great.
I haven't seen Breaking In yet.
Well, he's very good in
He
that.
obviously was great in Small Axe.
Breaking In, which no, it's just called Breaking. It was it was called 892 at Sundance.
Okay,
so I
Breaking,
keep forgetting that has a new title.
Yeah.
That's just one of those kind of pressure cooker movies
Yes.
where it's like it's real time and you're just watching a guy. You know, he takes a bank's hostage and you're just watching a guy like unravel.
But it is that thing when fucking.
But it's a very good performance.
Attack the Block came out. Everyone was just like, Jesus Christ, fully formed movie star. Here we go. And then it took so long for him to like pay off the promise of that, or for anyone to give him the chance to pay off the promise of that. Yeah. And then Star Wars ended up being a little bit of a double-edged sword for him.
I mean, sure, but he's very, very good in those movies.
He is. He's always good. It's just like, you know, I think there's been this battle, and he talks about it obviously very publicly, of just like figuring out where he slots in, what kind of actor he wants to be, what kind of movie star he wants to be.
You know, it's not just Star Wars, of course. And now I'm, you know,
Pacific Rim.
Pacific Rim was sort of a win for nobody,
yes.
right? Like, you know, everyone just sort of forgets that exists.
Yeah.
Detroit, I actually think he's excellent in, but he has a tough role.
And also is not as much of a presence as sort of we assumed going into that movie.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
he is good in it, but it's a tough role. And the movie doesn't work, and it's a smaller part than,
It's like whoever wants to rewatch it. And apart from that, he's really done very little. Like, the only other things post the beginning of Star Wars, there's something called Naked Singularity that came out last year. It doesn't seem to have made any impact. And that's it. He's in a sci-fi Netflix movie called They Cloned Tyrone.
Yes.
With Jamie Foxx.
Yeah.
But I'd like more. Oh, and then of course, Small Axe. Right, he was incredible.
Right,
in
that's
that
what
Small
I was
Axe
saying.
movie.
That was the one where it was sort of like, oh, we're getting back to no, you know, I remember when the Star Wars cast was announced, and I saw some people cynically making the comment of like, great, here are 6 promising actors' careers now like ground to a halt, because it's this notion of like Star Wars actually
do this for years,
never ends up being the gift you think it is to someone's career. Harrison's really the only person who like is able to build off the momentum, maintain being a proper movie star from the original series, and then to a certain degree, it's like. It was almost a thing that Portman and McGregor had to overcome for a little while.
Certainly.
McGregor, obviously, I'm sorry, Christensen gets like totally halted as well. And like, you know, Adam Driver obviously has just been off to the fucking races. Oscar Isaac, we talk a lot about feeling like he's not as exciting as we always hoped he would be, but does a lot of fucking good ass work. And then it does feel like Boyega and especially Daisy Ridley are the two who've gotten a little stuck.
I'd like to see more from both of them.
And it feels like Boyega's starting to like punch through again and figure out what he wants to do.
But this is he's a bit of a buffoon, is what I'm saying.
I'm saying I like that he's doing
Me
that.
too. I like it too.
It's an interesting choice for him to take this part.
In the movie, he does end up making the right decisions.
Yeah.
But at least when watching it, was not like, oh, he's turned all the way around, or he's definitely in on this. It's more like
the ending is as cut and dry as some people want to reduce it to. And I also think a movie that this is weirdly similar to in certain ways is The Last Duel, in that they very much feel like very modern films. They're not trying to like pretend that era was more modern than it was, but they're sort of like telling the stories from a modern perspective and using them to sort of be in dialogue with the shit we're still dealing with today.
Yeah, I wanted to shout out, there's in his court too, there's a handler who's queer that I don't think has like very much to do on screen, but it's just the presence is there. And I think like to your point, like they're doing little things to just like be somewhat contemporary with this historical.
Yeah, and it doesn't, to me, it does not feel like hollow performative stuff. It's like, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing about this movie felt particularly performative to me. It more because Gina is such a classical storyteller.
Yes.
Basically in all of her movies. She's sort of a small C conservative filmmaker to me in a lot of ways. Like she makes family dramas about like big relatable characters having big relatable breakthroughs.
There was that
no matter what the movie is.
There was that thing where like when Beyond the Lights went onto Netflix.
Sure. Right. Like,
you know this, right?
The rights went to Netflix or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it got filed under like black film as a genre. Sure. And she was like, this is a romantic drama. This is like a melodrama. These are the films you should be putting it up against. And like Reed Hastings actually responded to it and took a meeting with her and was like, maybe our algorithm's fucked.
No. What he said was like, I can't control it.
I can't control it.
It runs me right now.
We
It's
have to
running
whisper.
me. All of my decisions.
Yeah.
It's making.
Right.
I'm plugged into it at all times. My face is going to change based on whatever you want to look like.
The algorithm's like Ava and Ex Machina.
Yes, right. I saw Saranda. I sat next to him, or right next, very close to him for a glass onion.
Yeah.
And I said, "You've ruined cinema, sir." No, I didn't say it.
Thank you.
I also sat right behind Daniel Craig, and I took a picture. I'll show you. I took a picture of the back of his head. I don't usually take pictures of celebrities, but I was just like, the back of this motherfucker's head looks like Daniel Craig. Let me find it.
I have one quick complaint, just that I saw Slick Films, and you know me, I love like a wet movie. It's not what you think. It's like kind of more like, like bro kind of.
Oh,
like
you saw Slick Films on Netflix, and you were
Yeah.
mad that it was not right.
It's not a collection of wet movies.
You were looking for some oily pictures. Yeah, Jesus. Yeah. Yeah.
It just looks like him because it is.
It really does.
But
His head is kind of a perfect circle.
Yes.
And then he's got
just
these
like boink.
jug ears and obviously very distinctive hair color, close cropped. Yeah. But yes, no, she's a very classical filmmaker.
Yeah, that's
And
what I
it
mean.
is why you have to view this movie in the context of the other types of epics we're talking about. She's sort of, I'm overusing this phrase, but in dialogue with the history of turning historical events into aspirational epics.
And then she told Patches that she has another thing lined up that sounds sort of Woman King, which sounds fun. She said she was deciding between two products, and one of them was big, like a big scale thing.
Yeah, I just like that she's working at a good clip again.
Well, that's true. Yeah, because that's the thing is, of course, it's like I don't need her budgets to be bigger every time because I understand some filmmakers don't want to make a $200 million movie every time.
Yeah.
But I do want her to make movies consistently, which it does seem like the industry now understands that she's a pretty talented filmmaker who has an interesting perspective on things. Yeah. And so she's getting jobs. But it does feel like throughout the 2010s, it was more like she had to like fight for a meeting or whatever. Like fight to, pitch anyone on anything.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was that she was like, they'd be like, hey, do you want to make this? And she'd be like, well, I want to make it well. And they'd be like, oh.
Yeah.
That'll be expensive and take forever. Can't you make it badly?
Yeah.
Like, doesn't that kind of what happened with Silver and Black? Like,
I think so, basically.
bit,
and then at some point they were like, why is this a movie? It should be 2 movies. It should be a series. And she was like, what the fuck are we talking about?
Stupid industry.
I have a script that's good. Let me make it.
Right.
So I go Silver and Black in one film? Are we blowing our load too fast? I think that was truly.
Let's do Sil and then Fur.
We need to learn how the name
Can
comes
we get
together.
to Black? Black can be can be on HBO Max, and then the ampersand. I'm sensing spin-off potential. The plot of the movie, The Woman King. We begin on this big battle where they're rescuing women who have been abducted by people who are going to be to be sold into bondage.
Yeah.
And
another thing I think this movie is about is, in a very sober-eyed way, is just like, it is incredibly difficult to extricate yourself from bad systems. It is why the world remains bad.
Yeah.
My attitude is I sit there and I just go like, stop it. Stop doing that.
Yeah. Well, instead, the kingdom is just weighing whether or not to, I guess, go to all-out war. Right. Go to just like, can we challenge them openly and, rather than just like be defensive. So Gezo, the king, who's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder, is kind of into that, but they need more people.
Yes.
And then we are.
And I think also has a chip on his shoulder and also like wants to be the new hip modern king. Like
a little bit of that.
He has that attitude of like, I want to seem smarter, more in touch, more, yeah.
Yeah. Because there's a character that's one of his wives who is kind of, she got a lot of laughs at the premiere. I don't know if you guys got, who's kind of throwing some shade at him because he's like, General Niska, what do you think?
Right.
And he's actually listening to her. And the wife character is kind of the like, why don't we just stay status quo? Right. Like that's what she's always gone for. Like, why do we have to stir the pot?
She has been lucky enough to rise to the most comfortable position a woman can have in that culture at that time. And people are afraid of losing their status.
100%. So we have this parallel track, which is Nawi, who's the girl who basically anytime the dad tries to marry her off, she's just like, you little cuck bitch, I'm not going to marry you or whatever. Like she's impetuous. She's impudent with the men.
There's that moment when she has her final sort of like training test, and Boyega is like so charmed by her, and he is like, if you weren't such a good warrior, I'd make you a wife. And everyone laughs at it and views it as like, wow, you've really proven yourself. And it's such a like deeply sad moment.
Where it's like, that would be the win. Yeah, that would be the win. Yeah, that would be the lucky
and
you,
like,
you get to marry the king.
Here's this person who's now found the one way she can exist on the terms she wants to in her life, basically.
So Nawi is basically just taken to the doors of the castle, the fortress of the wherever the Ogoye live.
Sure.
Dropped off. Because the general people are not allowed to look at them, which is fairly cool.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like, I don't know what to do with her. You deal with her.
Right.
And she's immediately a pain in the ass. And Izogi, which is the Lashana Lynch character, is just like, you seem fun. I'll take you on. Right?
Yes.
And that's kind of, I mean, it's classic Hollywood storytelling shit. That's how we learn everything. It's how we learn about how the kingdom works and how everyone lives and, you know, how life functions inside the walls of their, and it's, it's easy stuff.
But the other thing is you're doling out with Viola Davis's character, the sort of, I mean, the thing I just love in Gina movies so much of how much she will focus on these little moments of just understanding how much visual storytelling can be conveyed in a glance, a reaction, a moment of privacy, whatever it is, right? I think it speaks to her also as an athlete too, where she's just like really keyed into the amount of story you can get out of body language, even in just a parting moment. But you're getting these moments of like Viola in the bath, you know, tending to her scars, these sort of like, well, this is the, you know, you got to see this fucking badass opening action sequence where she's just like ripping it up. And now it's just like, this one's 56. Her whole body hurts.
Sure.
You know, there's a certain degree to which she's like sharpened herself to just being kind of like so tightly wound and dead inside and all this sort of shit. These moments where she's sort of by herself and doesn't really know what to do with herself to a certain degree, right?
Right. Well, you don't have much of a life. Your life is good in one way,
right? In
that you get to live independently in part of this collective.
And it's forged by trauma. She had a traumatic life that she has now found a way to escape from by having to like turn herself into a Terminator.
But you're a soldier,
right?
You're in danger.
You're not just a soldier, but these women truly are like human weapons.
Yeah, they're pretty
down
cool.
To even just, you know, the carving of their nails and everything. It's like everything you do is to make yourself the most efficient weapon possible. But she immediately starts to react strangely to this young woman who has now entered.
I did not put that together initially, but yes, she is kind of like on her guard about this girl.
Who you feel like is... your initial maybe take of that is like they're very similar, and that's why they're butting
it's the
heads.
classic, right? I see myself in her, and I don't want her to
You're
make
like,
the same
is this just
or
fucking
whatever.
like Tom Skerritt and Top Gun or some shit? Is this just like
yes,
teach the hot-headed kid to learn some humility or whatever? But then you get this moment where she witnesses the scar on the shoulder.
Yeah,
reacts really strangely. Goes to Sheila Atim.
That comes late in the movie,
it
right?
Comes
it's like post second. It's around the
40
halfway.
minutes in. Yeah. And says, like, what happened to the baby? You've already gotten the glimpses now of clearly she suffered a lot of sexual abuse when she was younger, sort of being, haunted by these men and whatever. And you realize, like, oh, she had a child that was given away. And now she is finally at the point.
They're not allowed to get married or have children.
But it's like, as a 56-year-old woman, she is at the point where for the first time she has to contend with that child is now an adult that might cross my path at any time.
And we also are seeing in these flashbacks of the attack that
it's the earring guy.
It's the earring guy.
Right.
As a younger man, but it's like he's got that same sort of like large spike in his ear.
Yes.
Which is like, you know, adding another layer to what's going on. It's like she's discovering she's a mother, but it's so conflicted because of the situation, but also because it's the enemy.
Yeah. Yes. Right. This child's a reflection of the person she hates the most in the world. You know, a tremendous amount of shame and trauma and all this sort of shit.
Right.
I watch it, I think, in a more conventional way, it's going to dart around this thing for a long time. And then you get the scene where they're both in the bath together and Viola cuts open her shoulder and tells her the story of basically
she
an analog tracking device, right?
Yeah, she did a very metal way of tracking, right, like, or marking her child by putting a shark tooth inside of her.
Because
how do you feel
Sheila
about it?
Atim's just sort of going like, impossible, there's no way. And Viola Davis is like, tell me which orphanage you sent her to.
Right.
And she's like, I don't know. Like, her attitude is clearly, as her best friend, as her confidant, to just be like, don't think about it. It's impossible. What are the odds? Don't consider it. And Viola Davis is like, I have an insurance policy. I fucking put a tooth in her skin so that I could know without a shadow of a doubt.
It's a good way to do it.
Yeah. There's only like 10, 15 minutes, I feel like, before Viola expresses her concern and the confirmation. And from that point on, it's like
spread out over 2 scenes though that are far apart. There's
It
the
takes a
first
while
scene where she's
before-
like, what did you do with the
Right.
baby?
it's developed as a
And then
plot,
like
yeah.
post a big battle is when
Yes.
she's like, yo, can I check out your shoulder for a second?
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah, let me peep your shoulder.
I think it's almost the order is actually she realizes that the spike ear villain is her attacker.
That
Yes.
that
and
is
then
revealed very
sort of
late.
starts to put it together from
Yeah.
there.
So now he's getting trained.
Yeah.
Izogi is sort of combo teacher and big sister,
Yes.
I guess,
Drinking
right?
whiskey.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, because
exactly,
obviously Viola
like-
Davis is so
Works
loath
hard,
to
plays
take
hard.
on any maternal role with her. You know, she's already going to be like tough love with everybody. And she has such greater conflict, you know, with this child. Yeah.
And so they're mostly training with hand-to-hand combat
Pretty cool
Yeah.
stuff.
and using like weapons,
Yes, they're- right.
swords and knives.
That moment, that's a-
swords. Oh my god, the fucking swords in this.
Guns, you do see muskets in this
Right.
movie, but they
Yeah.
don't wield them
Well, she
There are-
does at the end.
at the end. But mostly
while
the idea-
wearing colonialist garb.
right. But the mostly in the movie, there are like the idea is basically they don't mostly don't have guns,
Right.
but they do have some male warriors who use them. But like it's sort of like, you know, the Dahomey Amazons are very fast and agile. And it's not really their vibe.
One of the key trailer moments of Lashana Lynch with the spear in the
Back on
shoulder.
trailer. Should we do a separate episode on the Woman King trailer?
The movie's a big hit.
No, go ahead.
No, the thing, it was when Ben was like,
Oh god, this movie is
Cringe.
very visceral
very
for
visceral.
people
It is.
who
For-
don't like blood,
Especially
and
for
that
this
kind
is
of
a
stuff.
PG-13,
Yeah.
right? It's a pretty good PG-13. Like it's
Yeah.
like successfully gnarly for a PG-13.
yes. And, you know, she's always interested in showing the actual consequence of violence rather
Yes,
than
right.
just, right, as we said. But the test where she's going up against the male warrior and there's the spear between the two of them and they have to walk closer to each other until one person backs off.
Right.
Some gnarly shit.
Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah. And then I love the movement, like the celebration, the dancing, like all of the specifics of like how they chant,
Yeah.
and just like celebrate. It's all just like really rich and like thought through.
Yeah, and they sing the Pina Colada song.
Yeah, those songs they sing, by the way, are historically accurate.
Mhm.
They did not like make up new songs for them. So you've got this side plot that I really dislike, where you have Santo Ferreira, which is the hero finds Tiffin guy, who's like a
Yes, who's the
Portuguese
Back.
slaver.
Yes.
He's sort of the bad guy, but like
He's a bad guy.
right, he's a bad guy. And then Malik,
Right.
played by Jordan Bolger.
Yeah.
He's very handsome.
Yes.
He's a looker.
Yeah.
He's British, who is half Dahomian himself.
Right. His mother was, yeah.
and so he's kind of, and they're there to treat with the king.
Yeah.
You know, they're not there for like they're there to chat.
Mm-hmm.
But Malik is kind of also just returning to his mother's homeland and like getting in touch with it, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And he falls in love with
Look,
Nawa.
I saw reviews spotlight this as the weakest element of the film. And so to some degree, watching it, I was pleasantly relieved that it was less of an element than I thought it was going to be. And it didn't play out as
It's just,
predictably
the
as I
movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes long.
Yeah.
He cut that out. It's 2 hours.
It's a clean two.
I'd love that. And I just think it needs to be either just more sketched out or just non-existent, because
It feels the most perfunctory.
it just feels a little perfunctory. They
Yeah.
I'm like, why do they like each other? Because they're hot. And I'm like, well, they are hot.
They are
and,
hot.
and shout out to them and props to them. Actually, that is a good reason to like someone. But I
It's
just
a good reason.
but like
to
she's
like
in the
someone.
middle of like forging this like deep bond with these women
Uh-huh.
and like learning to be a warrior, and then at the same time he's like, hey, what's up? And she's like, oh, hey, what's up with you? And I'm like, but I feel like she's more into like I don't think that would be enough to draw her away from this. And obviously the overall arc that she has is she realizes like, no, I can't be with him and I can't go away with him.
Yes. Right.
You know, we're and I knew throughout the movie, like, we're coming to that realization. We're not going to end with her being like, let's sail to Portugal. We'll have a nice life. You know, me.
Yeah, let's move to England. Who does that?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
All right. But or maybe they would just need to have the most electrifying chemistry where I'm like, well, yeah, these two are just so amazing together that, yes, I get it. I didn't really totally buy that.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, it's an old-fashioned romantic epic. You're looking something up.
No, I was looking at the New Yorker piece. There was a part I was trying to quote, but I couldn't find it.
Okay.
Yeah. People should read it. It's a good piece.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's better that we just direct people to, well-written pieces by people who know what they're talking about. Right. The movie starts with a big action sequence.
Uh-huh.
It has two big war sequences at the end.
Yeah.
One just versus the Oyo, right? And then one at the trading port.
But for the bulk of the movie, they really just invest you in these characters.
It's light on it. I mean, there's training stuff.
Yeah,
and there's like the big training,
right.
the big sort of like final test sequence and all that.
Yeah.
But it does like take the foot off the gas. But yet the movie does move. I would say, like, it never feels slow.
Yeah.
It's always engaging.
Mm-hmm. A part of the training that I just want to shout out is I love that the trainees kind of fuck with the senior officers and they take gunpowder and they put it inside the head of the dummy, like the practice dummy. Yeah. And so like they surprise the senior officers at one point when they're like, demonstrating like how to attack on them and they hit the head and it explodes. And I like how that then is set up later, like for the big fight scene. Like they use that tactic later.
What's the line? It's like, you don't need a gun to use gunpowder or whatever, right? Is that her line? Yeah.
Yeah.
The big sequence where she sort of pretends to like offer the Oyo the tribute, because the Oyo at some point show up and they're like, not only do we want, our usual tribute, but we want like 40 of your Dahomey Amazons. And he talks them down to 20 or whatever. Like there's the sequence where like they're supposedly presenting the warriors as prisoners.
Yeah.
And then obviously it's a decoy and she fights and it's cool.
I feel like we've talked about over the years a frustrating trend of like, especially big studio films trying so hard to be clever and being aware of how much more literate moviegoers are, and sort of like there's such a cottage industry about recognizing tropes and people sort of throwing basic screenwriting principles against it. It's fucking cliched, overwritten, whatever, to the detriment of you start throwing out a lot of cliches that exist because they work. People start doing sort of clever subversions.
Sure, use the baby in the bathwater. You're saying
clever, clever's sake.
Right. Sometimes we can use these things because they work and they are success.
You talk about this being the only other A+ movie of the year, along with Top Gun Maverick, which is another movie where everyone's just like, "Oh, you just make a movie."
Yeah, but also
you're just hitting all like the classic old Hollywood things that have worked for people.
But a movie that has every cliche in it.
Yes.
Top Gun Maverick, like everything where you're just like, wow, but it's so cheesy. And I'm like, yeah, was that a problem for you? And they're like, no, not really.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think this movie is not operating exactly at that scale, but I do think there's something
at no
about.
Point does anyone say too close for missiles, switching to guns or whatever? That'd be cool.
But you know what I'm saying? I do think that this movie is operating in a somewhat similar vein.
Yes, it's what you said before. You're saying it's the point you're making about like it's like modern but not contemporary, or modern but not self-aware. Like it's like it's okay. We can do
this
old-fashioned epic. Yeah. We can do the let's see it through the eyes of the new recruit to learn everything. Like some person might be like, that's an old trope. It's like
but
it's a successful trope.
The trope
helps
exists
as long as the characters are well defined and well performed. And there's an emotion to everything.
Which that's the thing. This movie invests in all the things it needs to invest to make those things sing.
When after this battle I described happens, Nawi and Izogi are captured, right?
Yeah.
Well, wait, come on. We got to talk about the fight. We can't just
Well,
skip
the fight
over
is really
it.
good. Yeah, no, let's talk about the
It's
fight.
fucking okay. So they use the palm oil, which like there's a little moment where you get to also see the idea like being put like, or like she challenges the king, like, let's start producing more palm oil.
Yes.
And you at least get to see a little bit of the production start to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the palm oil and the gunpowder play in now to this fight where they pour all of this palm oil in the fields just on the perimeter of where the warring faction is setting up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so then at like right at first light, they light up the
And they make all
palm
these like
oil,
makeshift bombs,
and they
essentially.
and
right.
then use the anthills
Yeah.
and disguise them, which are they're basically just like landmines.
Yeah.
Sure.
And they do a surprise attack. It's fucking sick.
It is. It's very sick.
And there's like this like slight fog,
Uh-huh.
you know, because it's that time of day. Man, that fight scene was like, I was like at the edge of my seat. It was really, really fucking good.
I agree. I have no beef with any of the fight scenes in the movie. They were all really impressive.
I think it was the only thing like we were saying after we saw it, Griff, where it was like because of the COVID stuff.
Yeah.
It like, you know, it was just like a lot. You didn't get a wide shot. You didn't get to really feel the full like battle.
I was just rewatching some old guard things yesterday, and it's, you know, it's a testament to how Gina works with her actors, and you know, old guard, she has someone like Charlize who's like so fucking good at action, where it's like, oh, they can actually do the thing in full, they can play this out, right? This movie, I think she was coming up against like, you now have a third as many people as you thought you were going to have, so you have to break this into smaller pieces because you're maybe reusing the same crowd people behind it, or maybe you can't clear out the space to the same degree you could before because you have to create a smaller bubble around it, or whatever the fuck it is, you know? I think all the action choreography in this is phenomenal.
Yeah. Me too.
It's visceral.
yes,
Like
yes.
it is so like at times like really got me like squirming.
Was that she actually like fucking builds story beats into her action sequences. There is like a
Yes.
chain of events happening for a reason that have a build to them rather than just sort of chaos of people just swinging swords and being badass.
Yeah. I just loved it. All of that sequence. I like the big sequence at the port where they free everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I like the escape with Lashana Lynch where she, I mean, spoiler alert, dies. It was very moving and effective.
There's that moment on the back of the cart where they're all lying there and she goes, "Do you want to live anymore?"
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, no, you mean the one girl who throws herself
Yeah.
out. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good.
I also like how the rope, which is like kind of a thing with the training, right? That's the first like weapon that they're taught to work with. It's incorporated with the sword, and she starts like swinging it
Knife
around.
on rope seems like a really Ben weapon.
Yeah, dude, it's fucking like
But
that's
I
inventive.
do love that too, where right they're giving her the rope, and now he's like, rope, boring. I want like a fucking giant sword.
Yeah.
And she's like, sure, take the giant sword, cut the head off. And she can't, you know, she doesn't know how to, you know, put her heft behind it
The
yet.
final test being like going through the thorns, which is also, I mean, how Viola finds the scar on the shoulder.
Yes.
But that sequence is very visceral as well. Yeah.
My God, those thorns are so big.
Ben was
They're
screaming.
like the biggest thorns I've ever seen.
Yeah, the thorns are. Shirley was weird. I remember now, Shirley was like squirming in her chair.
Oh my God.
And I was like, thorns? And she was like, I just don't.
Bad.
I was truly like having to hold my hand
It's
up
like
and like
nature's barbed wire.
like-
No, I mean, I'm
Open my
not saying I
fingers.
want to throw myself into a thorn
Sounds like
field.
you do.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying, like,
I know what to get you for your fucking birthday.
well, you know, like Barbarian, another
Yes.
movie that's out
Yes.
right now,
Mhm.
has basements in it, right? It's a
You
horror movie with
hate
basements.
basements.
And I was like, well, but it's not like one of those things where I go around being like, you know what, I hate basements. I was watching and I was like, I think I might have a problem
Well, you
with
texted
basements.
us immediately.
Yeah,
You were like, it really hit me, but I should also mention I'm very afraid of basements.
Yeah,
you did
like-
say that.
like, I think because I never had one in my like I never grew up with a basement.
Yeah.
They're just extra spooky to me. I'm like, what's going on down
We
there?
did-
No one's really watching the store down
We
there.
did fucking George Lucas talk show in Detroit 4 days after I saw Barbarian, and Patrick Connor, our producer,
Got
had
your
booked
Airbnb.
us an Airbnb,
Slept well.
and the basement was locked. And I was just
Wow,
like,
yeah.
I hate everything about being here.
Should have gone in there.
I couldn't.
Should
I
have.
want to check just to make sure.
Right. You want to check, make sure there's any secret doors.
I won't spoil.
Have you seen Barbarian?
no.
Scary.
People should go see it.
Good movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love basements. Some of my best memories have happened in basements.
That's also a
Not
movie
surprising.
that is interesting in that you talk about like, me criticizing movies for being too clever for their own good. I'm not going to spoil anything about this movie, but it is a film where if you actually line up the series of events, it is less insane in a way
Yeah.
than the way it chooses to tell its story.
Right.
It actually has a pretty straightforward story,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's the construction of it's really smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Woman King.
Izogi dies
Mhm.
in that they're trying to escape
Yes.
from being sold, correct? Like
She
they
takes a
almost
bullet,
pull it
right?
off.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which even I just feel like it's like guns are slowly creeping more and more into this world. For as much as they train, it's like if someone can shoot you from that distance, everything you've done is going to start to become less and less effective in defense, you know?
Right.
Right. Everything you are can just be like immediately wiped out from, 100 feet away or whatever.
And Naniska has basically been told, because she has successfully defeated the Oyo,
Yeah.
been told by the king, like, good job, buddy.
Yeah.
You get to be married to me now.
Mhm.
Big win for you.
Sure.
And she's like, eh. And everyone's like, I mean, come on, man. Like, because it's basically like, that's like your gold watch. It's like retirement. It's like,
Yeah.
congrats. You
Sure.
don't. And she's like, I want to go get my people. I want to go get Nawi, and the fact that she's her secret daughter is obviously a part of it, but also these are her girls.
Yeah.
And she defies orders to do it,
Mhm.
goes and gets her. You've got Nawi, as you say, has now been dressed. She puts on a nightgown because
Yes.
she's got to wear something
From her Portuguese.
from
boyfriend,
her Portuguese. How do you want to describe him? Not even boyfriend, ingenue,
Right.
whatever.
No, but it's right.
Potential
She
lover.
She comes out of it in this sort of like a colonialist garb wielding a gun. I mean,
Yes.
it's what.
And then they
sort of-
take down the entire kind of
Right.
port, the whole sort of like operation there.
it's
you know,
also
it's very,
speaking-
very
it-
cathartic.
The analog she is presenting of how these are the basic themes that present themselves across history and our human nature in different costumes with different weapons.
Right.
I mean, she's almost at an inflection point in history, but the same things are going to perpetuate themselves in one form or another.
They go back.
Yeah.
She's proclaimed the Woman King, which is sort of defined as like, it's like separate from being a wife or whatever, right?
Yes.
It's sort of like you would be my partner, or you'd have more of an equal say in ruling the kingdom.
It almost feels like a vice president position.
Right.
It's a good look. Let's say this. It's a good title.
It's a good title, and it's funny. Like the movie could end right there.
I was expecting it to.
Exactly. It feels like the movie's about to end.
Yes.
And then in my opinion, an effective, although some people disagreed with me on this at Toronto, but very Gina move.
Mhm.
There's like 5 more minutes of her sort of going to Nawi and them kind of acknowledging their familial, right?
Yes.
Like, their relationship,
Yeah.
which you don't need per se. Like it's already
No,
kind
but
of happened.
I repeat again, her entire body of work as an artist, as a storyteller, is very much informed.
She's like, this is more the victory here. This is more what matters.
Yeah, she comes at stories from the perspective of someone who didn't know where she came from. Gina herself,
Yeah.
the struggle to sort of find your family and all of that.
And so I just have to imagine there was some note at some point where they were like, can't we just end on, and you are now the Woman King. Everyone cheers.
You
Cut
can
to
imagine
black.
it ending
the
like
Woman
the
King.
Phantom Menace, Boss Nash
Right.
cheering in the crowd. But
But I like the little coda person.
I do too.
I think it's a very successful movie. It's just kind of like, I have very few complaints about it. It's just a
Yeah, I mean,
viewing
Ben and I just watched it. We were
experience.
like, that's a fucking good movie. That's
Yeah.
a well-made movie.
Yeah, and I feel like that has been the general reaction of just everyone being like, yeah, it's a fucking crowd pleaser. They don't make them like that anymore,
Right.
like that kind of stuff.
I don't know. I find everything about it
Shout out.
pretty encouraging, and I certainly
Yes.
think you are allowed to fucking debate this text and wrestle with it and what have you. But I think as a movie, it's a pretty excellent little object.
Well, we should talk about one of the most encouraging things, which is the box office game.
$19 million. It's
Um,
one of these things where it was like, oh, it's projected to open at 12, and then going into the
Yes.
weekend, they were like, it might overperform at
might
15
do
or
15,
16,
right? Yeah.
and then it came in at 18, and then a day later, they were like, actually, it's 19.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it kept trending up.
Do we want to play the box office game?
I do.
Okay. Woman King, number 1, $19 million.
Number one movie in America.
Number 2, we just discussed it. Horror film.
Barbarian.
with a 38% hold, which is crazy for a horror movie, but the combo of not a lot of competition
Horror
and great
basically, if you drop 65%, Weekend
Like,
2 people
good
are like
job.
humongous.
buzz.
Incredible. Horror is like the most front loaded.
Right.
And I'm just kind of astonished by the success of that movie's marketing campaign still basically being don't find out anything about this.
But right. I still haven't seen the trailer, and I know you love trailers. Like
I
for
hate
example,
them. And I
the
actually haven't
Woman
watched the Barbarian trailer. All I knew going to
I've-
Barbarian was the poster.
I've been told same.
Yeah.
I've been told the trailer for Barbarian is surprisingly
I've heard that as well.
good at hiding everything.
I've heard that as well.
So I should check it out.
Yeah.
But people should see it. It's a really, really good movie.
Yeah.
Number 3 at the box office is another horror movie.
I will say, because I saw it, I liked it. I texted our group text with the Doughboys afterwards because
Like
Nick
that.
and Mitch had already seen it. And I was like, I liked it a lot. I don't think I loved it. And you saw it and you were like, I loved it. In the week since I've seen it, it's only grown on me.
Sims Bump.
The Sims bump. It sits well.
It's a fucking great movie.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal.
Number 3 is another horror movie though. It's new this week.
What's the fucking new this week horror movie? Oh, it's Pearl.
Pearl.
I haven't seen Pearl yet.
Neither have I.
I'm excited
I've
to see
heard
it.
very mixed things, but then Martin Scorsese was going for the mat.
I know. It sounds like
He
my
loves
kind
him.
of shit.
Cool. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Scott Tobias was saying to me that it's like Douglas Sirky, and I was like, well, that's
That's
interesting.
right. Right. Our friend Arp was like, it's like more of a sad character study than a horror movie. And I'm
Right.
like, sign me up.
Number 4 is one of the weirdest buried things of the year. It's new this week. It's a mystery movie.
Is it this thing is
What's
called
the title?
See How They Run?
That's right.
Yeah.
Which is one of those things that they like announced last year.
Yeah.
And they were like announcing from Searchlight, like, a mystery movie with Saoirse Ronan and Sam Rockwell.
I will say, you mostly go to screenings. I've been seeing this trailer before every movie for the
Right.
last 3 months.
Right.
It's one of those, maybe it's more so in New York, but that trailer has been unavoidable. I frankly have found that trailer annoying
Sure.
and sort of like forced Westlight kind of vibes. Everyone who sees it says it's pleasant, that it's entertaining.
The word I've heard ranges from pleasant disappointing to pleasant fine, pleasant good.
But the trailer for me was nails on a chalkboard.
It's a real sort of like 4 to 6 out of 10 swing.
despite Saoirse being like my favorite.
Love her.
Yeah.
But the fact that when a movie like that is not at a festival
Yes.
and is not really like being pushed to the press at all, I'm sort of like, does it just stink? But it more just seems like everyone's like, I don't know. It is what it is.
I'm also like, is that better than Amsterdam? If people are doing their fucking Wes Anderson murder mystery riffs?
Right.
That's another thing, by the way. I saw Amsterdam
Right.
last weekend.
Yeah.
Q&A afterwards. I'll just say this. The moment I walked out of the Q&A was when David O. Russell claimed that the film was 60% based on truth. That movie is so much more fictional than this film.
Sure. Right. Well, yeah. Right. But he's pretending it's
And
based
I would
on
be very surprised
But I
if
mean-
it is held up to the same level of scrutiny as this movie
I
is.
think Ehrlich had some tweet about it, and it's so true. It's like, it's such a plague, the movies that are like, that begin with like, mostly true events. Or, this is kind of based on a true
David,
story.
Can I tell you what the wording is at the beginning of Amsterdam?
What
A
is
movie
it?
that I do not really like.
Right.
It's a lot of this really happened.
I fucking hate that
And then it's like he at the end was like 60% of this is real. And I'm like, every single character in this film is invented.
made up. So
You're
how
like
real could it
making
possibly
up
be?
fictional narratives with fictional characters running concurrent with actual historical events. Anyone can fucking do that. Don't a lot of this really happened. Yeah, it takes place in a society where there's running water. What the fuck are you talking about?
Sounds good. Number 5 of the
Dumb
box
movie.
office is at $96 million. And at this point, I kind of just need it to get to 100
Bullet
just for
Train.
fun.
It's going to
Bullet
be
Train.
really frustrating if it doesn't make it to
I think it's going to make
There's
it.
nothing more infuriating than a Rampage topping out at like 98.7.
Get it to 100. Let's just put
Let's
it in
kick
some
it.
drive-ins or whatever.
For me, a perfectly entertaining
You've
film.
said it many times.
Yeah.
now.
I
you've also-
recommend a ride on the train.
We've talked about all these movies: Top Gun: Maverick, DC League of Super Pets, The Invitation, Minions: Rise of Gru, and then new at number 10 is Moon Age Daydream, which I will not be seeing.
Why?
It looks boring.
Okay.
I just hate those kinds of like David Bowie's. You've never seen him before. I'm like, I've seen him before.
I've seen so
He's
much.
a great performer. I love him. I don't think this is going to blow my mind.
Modern Pox, but I talked about in last week's episode, the Pinocchio episode, how much I liked Invitation to a point and felt really let down by the last act of the thing. And then it's already rentable on digital. And I saw the director posting the hey, finally the cut I wanted you to see is out. I think it makes a big difference. And I'm like, am I going to watch Invitation again for the second time in 2 weeks in the hope that it actually
Pays off.
follows through on
It
what I
probably
felt like the
doesn't.
movie was close to, or is it like there are 3 more minutes of blood?
That would be my guess. No, maybe not blood, but like that it's not that different. But
Right.
who knows?
I don't know.
Maybe you will.
There's some good stuff in that film.
That's the box office game. I'm very excited for the next Gina movie whenever it comes.
Let's also say, because we're doing Fletch on Patreon,
yeah.
that episode dropping the 21st. Is that
yes,
right?
that's right. So that
It,
episode
already
just
came
dropped.
out.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, so it just came out. Because this is the same weekend in which Fletch bombed, we, on that episode, do the box office game for 15 to 20.
Yeah. 15 numbers 15 to 20.
Numbers
in the box
15
office.
to
So
20.
get excited
So
for
if you want
that.
the rest of that. I'll say this too, just as an addendum to the Fletch episode, because you did your full, tirade against the streaming movie, a thing which I notoriously love. I love
right.
streaming movies, and David felt the need to mount a Bruce McGill in The Insider
Yeah, pretty much.
courtroom defense of it.
I banged the table.
I'm the only one of the 3 of us who saw Fletch in theaters, and I will say it maybe sounds like it plays better at home than it does in
Maybe
theaters.
it is the exception to the rule.
'Cause you guys
I mean, I
liked
would
it
have
more
seen it in
than
a
me.
theater if I had
I
any
know.
time. Yeah.
But like Woman King's a movie where you're like, great to see in a theater.
Sure.
I basically think all movies are better in
look,
theaters.
I'm willing to admit that
Both of you gave Fletch a half star higher than I did.
Fletch going to streaming makes more sense than Secret Headquarters or like what's
Yes.
another like obviously big budget movie that was for some reason put on streaming.
Correct.
You know,
There was another
fucking
Paramount Plus.
the Halloween
Right.
movies going to Peacock.
Right.
I know those
Right.
are in theaters too, but like why?
Yes.
Why would you think anyone
Orphan
would?
First Kill, another one where you're like, why is this going straight to Paramount Plus?
That was so weird.
It's the
movie's
end of
not bad.
August. Put it in theaters.
Yes. Anyway.
Anyway,
But yeah, it's a fair point.
David, do you want to tell your TIFF story? Because you saw this movie at TIFF. You've already talked about being there at the festival.
No, I'm gonna save it for
Well, now
this point.
you realize what you're doing right now.
what? Building it up. It's not that good.
No, you're telling people what's coming at the end of the year.
Oh fuck. Should we cut that out?
I don't know, David.
I don't know. What do you want to do?
I don't know. It's your choice.
Well, what do you mean? Well, we can just cut out me saying that.
It's the second time you said it.
Oh, did I say it? I said it on mic before?
Yeah. But also, do you want to tell the story
Well,
now?
the
or-
only thing is,
Yeah.
it's about the circumstances under which I saw that movie.
Okay.
So I feel like it actually worked
So
better
are we
on-
bleeping out that movie?
Yeah, sure, fine. That's
The
actually
intrigue.
fun. Yeah, intrigue.
I think most people feel like they fucking.
They probably know that we're doing that.
Yeah. Anyway.
We've long said we would do it.
Right.
Yeah.
The bill has finally come due. Yes. Anyway, David saw some mystery movie at Toronto, which we will be covering on main feed
And I saw
later
it
in the year as
on-
part of a director miniseries.
The story is that I saw it on 0 hours sleep.
Wow.
0 hours of sleep. And I still liked it.
Sounds like a real barbarian
Or
situation.
a real Griffin
You know what I
Newman
like?
situation.
I like in the game of talking around anything that happens in Barbarian, letting people assume that everything happens in Barbarian.
That's the thing. And I
It's
do
like,
worry
wait,
it's overhyping the movie in a weird way where people like, I don't understand. Like, at no point did like a pirate get elected president in that movie or something where you're like, okay, fine.
It
Yes,
is
it's like,
why I do think it's the right kind of expectation to put people in for, where it's like,
look, you won't see where it's going, but it is actually
bug nut shit
sensical.
happens in that movie.
Right.
But it's not like fucking I don't know. I can't even think of what movie.
You know, a lot of people are comparing it to Malignant, and I think Malignant is a more bonkers, quote unquote, movie
In
in
a lot of
terms of
ways.
like it takes more flights of fancy.
This film is just so tricky in the way it unfolds its story
Presents
to
it
you.
very cleverly.
And it just every 15 minutes
Does
makes
something
you feel
clever.
like I literally have no idea where this is going or what this has been up until this point, which is exciting to watch a movie like that.
So check it out.
We're back to Kubrick.
Yes, back to Kubrick next week. Doctor Strangelove with Sean Fennessy, which we already announced, I believe.
Yeah,
But that's
get
the next
excited.
episode. Yep.
Damn dirty freaks.
Yep.
You can stop complaining. We got the podcast The Ride Guys on and Sean Fennessy. Now you have to come up with new people to bug us to have on the
I'm
show.
sure they will.
New friends who we were thrilled to have on the show.
I'm sure they will.
We should also say, because we said this on Patreon, but this is the first main feed episode we've recorded in our offices.
Oh, that's right. We said that on Patreon, but we are in the new offices.
Blank
They're
Check
not done
Studios.
yet, but they're
They're very
We're
much
in
not
them.
done, but we're in a space that is an office studio space that we now record this podcast, which is nice.
Great.
And RIP the Hausoleum as workplace.
I continue to live there.
You continue to live there. It's now purely a place for living. Thank you all for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to Marie Barty for our social media, helping to produce the show. Agent McKay and Alex Barron for our editing. Lee Montgomery and the Great American Novel for our theme song. JJ Birch for our research. As we said, tune in next week for Dr. Strangelove. You can go over to Patreon. You can hear our Confess Fletch episode and continue to do the Roger Moore Bond films. We also have 2 more Kubrick bonuses coming up. 2010, you may contact Dr. Sleep, the rare sequels made to Kubrick films, not by Kubrick, and then a sort of Kubrick-themed Talking the Walk that I cannot remember if we've actually revealed at this point or not. Go to blankpod.com for some links to some real nerdy shit. And as always, to the best of my knowledge, the 3 of us have yet to drop a Thor in this bathroom, have we?
That is true.
Wow.
We're going to end on that.
I don't know. What do you end on?
And as always, gunpowder. I don't remember the line. Doesn't have to be in a gun.
Oh, let me check on the IMDb quote page. The line is, if you like pina coladas.
Okay.